Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Let's get this out of the way. That is the wrong one again. Geez, you know, it's interesting. I checked this in great detail, and then it's not there. I make sure it pops up, and then it reverts back to mommy. So this is mirrored fractals. There we are. So this is where you can go to get the soundtrack from today, scientificsounds.com/mirrored fractals. And this is where you can go to ask a question or make a comment. scientificsounds.com/ask-a-question. This is where you can go to my YouTube channel to see all the live streams that I've done up to this point. I'm not exactly sure which one this one is, but we're approaching close to 100 broadcasts. Unbelievable. Wow. Time flows relentlessly on. And things have continued to go through massive change in my life, which means that it's happening in your life too, because we're sort of all entangled together now. And if it's not happening, it's happening soon. If you're new, we listen with headphones. At the end, I'll have a soundtrack that links everybody's brainwaves together. We're creating sort of a brain entrainment mind link, so we can precisely align everyone's consciousness together into a group collective. Once everything is aligned to that level, then there's power in numbers, power in a collective array of minds who, if we can refine our ability to open ourselves to the universe to flow through us and manifest a world that is the highest expression of sort of divine intelligence or whatever, the highest expression of balance that the universe could be, instead of the imbalanced system we've got now, because human beings have sort of stepped out of the rule of law of nature. All other life forms follow the laws of nature, except for us. We've stepped out of that. And when you do that, you screw things up. You disturb the balance. You disturb the balance, and then it cascades, and the cascades cascade. And pretty soon, the cascade of imbalances reaches a critical point where the entire system collapses. And that's about where we're headed with planet Earth and climate change and pollution and politics and division, and we've lost our connection with the indigenous self on a big scale. So this is an attempt to rebalance that, to change that. And the only place it can change is on the inside. So there's power in numbers and alignment and precision, and the 21st century is the place where we now have the tools and technology to accomplish that has never been possible before. Level of precision of mind linking together. I tell you, I have all these news feeds that I watch all the time, magazines and electronic media. It's just becoming amazing. The level of new information coming through, and a lot of it has to do with quantum reality and quantum math that explains what things are going on and how that closely aligns with ancient understandings and practices, as I've said many, many times before, where quantum physicists discovered the Vedas, so to speak, or the I Ching, the oldest written document on the planet in Chinese, 5,000 years old. I did a whole live stream on the I Ching and the mathematics of the I Ching and the 64 hexagrams and the deep link between the math of what starts out as yin-yang, which form two symbols, a broken line and a solid line, and then doubling those and tripling those, and then making them into 6 lines, and that yields the math of 64 hexagrams, and that's what the I Ching is. And those 64 hexagrams are closely aligned with the 64 codons of the DNA, and how biological processes are distinctly described in the I Ching, 5,000 years old texts, and how that modulates into the 64 situations, the 64 conundrums that I call it, in life. The 64 situations of the school of hard knocks that we all have to go through, and those 64 situations are sort of the puzzles to solve. How do I step into this experience in a balanced way that handles it 100% properly, so that no disturbed energy or pain or hurt come from it, that I step through in Buddha mind and it all balances out. Anything slightly less than that creates perturbations that create problems and situations that eventually teleport or become or assemble into one of the other 64 conundrums. So if I don't step through this doorway, this one of the 64 conundrums that is presented to me as a situation in life, and if I can't move through it with Buddha mind, so to speak, then it creates disturbances in that field, which eventually cascade into other conundrums and other situations. And all conundrums and all situations are one of those 64. So if I don't step through one of those pathways properly, it generates other pathways that need to be handled. So it's sort of endless as I learn how to step through each doorway in the 100% proper way, as what the I Ching calls the superior man, the balanced superior man, who steps through the doorway with no perturbations. Therefore, that doorway, that one of those 64 doorways that I just passed through properly, now pops out of the field. I never have to walk through it again. Now I've got 63 to walk through. And the next one that I walk through, it's not 100% proper, creates perturbations, and I've just created new doorways that I'm going to have to walk through again. And those doorways are all one of those 64. So. But the fact that this allegory of life and the situations that we are presented with to solve, to walk through properly, and its relationship to the 64 doorways with the 64 codons of the DNA, which form the basic structure of me, the me who has to walk through a doorway. Curlicues itself around into its own sort of mirrored fractal. It's an endless hall of doorways, of the 64 doorways, and I can only eliminate them by walking through them properly. And how I know how to walk through them properly is consulting the I Ching as an oracle, which you can do by throwing 3 coins 6 times, and constructing a hexagram and looking the hexagram up in the book. And when you look at that hexagram, the book is presenting you with the present moment. As the sages of the I Ching have said, the hexagram that you get is the only one that you could possibly have gotten, because the one that you got. Now, from the standpoint of quantum physics, when I throw a hexagram and I get that hexagram, which is a distillation of the present moment, expressed, and I read that, it describes the present moment because it's a distillation of the present moment. It's the hexagram that grew out of this moment. So of course it describes the present moment properly. think it just crashed.
What just crashed?
My screen looks like it's crashed, and I'm not sure if I'm still broadcasting or not. Never.
Hold on. Well, it's frozen here too, huh?
Yeah.
No, don't X out, because as soon as you X out, it will disconnect, and you'll have to do a new one. So let's see here.
I wonder if the internet just went down or something.
No, it's still up.
How weird is that?
Yeah, it's weird. What is this? I'm just gonna see if it switches here on this side. Oh, says they can hear us though.
Okay.
Hold on.
We're working on it.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, if you can hear me, it looks like the video crashed.
Yeah, sorry about that, you guys. We're gonna play around with this for just a second. Let's try this. Which one is it?
It's probably, you think it's OBS that crashed, or it's...
I wonder if it's the camera that crashed.
maybe if I unplug it.
Yeah, try unplugging it really quick. Or here, you can do it from here. You can do it. No, here, I got you.
No, that's the microphone.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Oh.
Oh, that was something. I don't know how you got that. What is that?
I see something here. I can't.
Why is it doing it that way?
Hold on. We're getting somewhere. Hang in there with us, you guys. Configure crossbar, color space format, device custom. No. Oh, that's weird. It's only letting me keep it small like that.
Oh.
Nope, no, it's...
No, that's the old one.
Yeah, I can only seem to...
Well, as long as I can see something. It won't be full screen.
Good. Try one more time here. Yeah, how weird is that? And I can't enter... Oh, here we go, maybe. What is this, 1990? Ah! Alright. See if...
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
So
for some reason... Yeah, it'll probably populate back up.
So if in the comment section, if you'll just comment that if you can see the video or not. All right, so let me just go back to here. No. Oh, let's see. Yay! Shade to the rescue one more time. Well, that's a first. Almost 100 broadcasts never had that one happen. But I guess that's the first time for everything, right? That sort of that sort of reminds me of a physics question. About the origin of the universe, you know. So whether you believe in the Big Bang or not, the question always is, what came before the Big Bang. If you believe in the Big Bang, what came before the Big Bang? And there's a whole bunch of different scientific, philosophical viewpoints about that. One of those is something called vacuum genesis. So on this hand, we've got an argument that says, well, you can't just get something from nothing. And on this half of the argument, you're going, well, in science, there's no absolutes. You can't say this will never happen. And when scientists are sure of something, they're never 100% sure. There's always a tiniest possible little variable that could be nullify it. Statistically, the probability of this being so is 99.99999%, but there is that one possibility of it not happening, and that's the probability of it not happening is so small that it's discounted, but it's still there mathematically. For instance, the probability of the entire universe just arriving out of nothing with a giant explosion, which is the Big Bang, is so infinitesimally small that its probability is almost zero. However, because you've got eternity and forever to run the math out and to roll the dice, if you've got forever to roll the dice, then absolutely for sure the universe would pop out of nothing. Right? Because as soon as you've got eternity to roll the dice, as soon as I've got eternity to throw the Scrabble letters up in the sky and have all the little squares with the letters on them drop down, if I can do it forever, then the probability that all of them will land and form the Encyclopedia Britannica is assured. It will for sure absolutely happen. On the other hand, but that's only if the Big Bang that exploded from nothing, because the probability was multiplied by infinity, by forever. The next question is, if the universe was not around before the Big Bang, then will the Big Bang eventually run out of steam and the universe will cease to exist? Which brings up the other point where if you don't believe in the Big Bang, then there's other mathematical explanations which lead scientists to believe a Big Bang took place, where the expansion of the universe, because of the red shift, when things expand, they shift into the red end of the spectrum, and when they're coming closer to you, they shift to the blue. Every place we look in the universe is shifting red, so everything is expanding away from each other. But there's another explanation for redshift besides accelerating away from you. So if you choose to not interpret redshift as things expanding away from you, then they don't all, if they reverse, go back to a single spot where there was a Big Bang, which is essentially why they think there was a Big Bang, following the redshift of everything backwards to a single point. And then we get into the weird stuff of Terence Witt, where he wrote a book called The Undiscovered Universe, the Null Theory, where this is what nothing looks like, where you've got nothing on one side of the equation with an equal sign and nothing on the other side, which is infinitely complex nothing, which is just all the mathematical relationships of nothing to itself that sums to nothing. Nothing plus, nothing minus, square root of, divided by nothing equals nothing. So the complex nothing is every possible mathematical value of nothing to itself that sums to nothing, and the only difference between simple nothing and complex nothing is these mathematical relationships. So the relationships mathematically of nothing to itself actually is something that pops out of nothing. and the relationships, the mathematical relationships of nothing to itself, is this. This is what nothing looks like from that standpoint. Therefore, no Big Bang is necessary, and the core of what we think of as dark matter, where you split all the atoms apart and all the component parts apart until you arrive at the base of the quantum field, where there's nothing there at all except energy pattern relationships forming standing waves. Standing waves in what? What's vibrating? What's forming standing waves? What's the substance? And nobody's got an answer for that. And nobody can measure it because it's too subtle for our instruments. Doesn't mean it's not there. But from the classic ancient scriptures, like the Vedas and I Ching, that substance is consciousness itself. And the ripple patterns of forming standing waves is the idea of consciousness. And what's the idea? This is the idea. All of this. It's an evolving idea. And you never know what's going to happen next, like my camera just crashing. You could still hear me, but you couldn't see me. But just because it hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean it's not going to happen now. And every instant from now is that. Everything that we all consider to be the foundation of reality, that we can depend on, my feet on the ground, gravity, things around me, time, that I'm years old and I live in this body, and all of these things that we take absolutely for solid, for granted that this is so, could evaporate in the next moment from now, just like my camera going off. That being said, the current state of science and discovery, my news feeds are just burning right now. The level of discoveries about the nature of reality is just off the charts. Every single day there's some new mind-blowing thing coming through the news feeds that I'll talk about the nature of reality from a quantum standpoint and from the sort of fractal holographic nature of everything, where everything is reflected in everything else in miniature. It's all microcosms of each other. It's a hall of mirrors that stretches to infinity, and each mirror reflects a larger pattern in miniature. And inside the miniature pattern are more miniature patterns that reflect the whole. It's sort of allegorical in a way. But the latest sort of mind-blowing stuff just reiterates what we've talked about many times before, where we look at the supergalactic patterns of these highways of galaxies. I mean, all of these little dots are whole galaxies. And they follow along these pathways in the cosmos. And these pathways of these lines of force look so remarkably like the connectome in the brain, where neurons follow pathways just like this. It's a fractal design where the cosmos reflects how the brain is networked. And some scientific articles have Nobel Prize-winning physicists looking upon this and saying, are we looking at a universally large brain? Because the sort of fractal nature of the reflection of these patterns in how the brain is wired are so remarkably similar that even the hard-nosed scientific community is sitting up and taking notice and wondering, if this is a giant mind we're part of, and that our whole galaxy is just a little tiny, teeny particle in, supergalactic brain, where these connectomes in the human brain look like cosmic connectomes. All of it looks similar to each other. In some cases, you can't see the difference. Neurons in neural nets. So is the universe thinking? Is the universe, and according to the ancient texts, that's exactly what's happening. The universe is thinking a thought, and everything we see is vibrating, nested patterns of resonance, forming standing waves, and the math that forms all of that is the same math that we see in the piano behind me, the same math that forms octaves and harmonics in music theory. It's all very sort of mind-blowing. It's more not so much a universe as a multi-lyric, a song, the song of the universe. But all of it kind of coalesces together, infinitely large and infinitely small, and somewhere smack dab in the middle of it all is us, generating the next idea, which is a reflection of infinitely large patterns in the universe and reflected in infinitely small standing wave patterns at a quantum field, all synced up together in a sort of entangled resonance. The galactic body reflected in my mind, cosmic webs and brain webs and subquantum webs all woven together around a central idea, which is the idea itself of what reality is. And if we align ourselves perfectly enough, and we align a minimum number of people, we can change that idea. We can modify the idea of what the universal mind is expressing. We are the universal mind. But when we align ourselves together precisely, and enough of us can align together, then we're not separated from that node. We're not stuck out here all by ourselves. We're linked up together, and we start to be able to have a place in this network where we have an influence on it. And the more people involved aligned together properly, the more influence we have on changing the idea that is being expressed by the universal mind, so to speak. All sounds very crazy, right? But that's why we're here, right? Look at this. This is PubMed. This is the most premier publication in science and medicine, NIH. Something called the Thalmic neuron theory, which is not new, but this information is. Theoretical basis for the role played by the central nervous system in the causes and cures of all diseases. Now, excuse me, but I've been harping on this idea because it's the central tenet of my sound work with heart rate variability. So the central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord and nerve roots. It's the communication network between the brain and all the body parts. And then all the body parts and all the systems are sending signals back up the spinal cord to the brain. And so it's this feedback network. And the feedback network has its core at the autonomic nervous system, which is composed of the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, and its location is in the center of the brain in a place called the hypothalamus. The network of spinal cord, brainstem comes up to the hypothalamus, which has the pituitary hanging down, hardwired into it, and the limbic system wrapped around it, which is the emotional control centers. And above the hypothalamus is the thalamus itself, two giant circular lobes that just beneath them is the hypothalamus, hypo meaning underneath, thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary. Back here is the pineal gland, and the thalamus is the master switchboard where all this information coming from all the parts of my body go through this massive switchboard in the thalamus, where it gets directed out into the areas of the cortex where its final processing takes place. And then once it's analyzed all the signals from the body, it switches it over to another area of the cortex, which sends the signals back down in the body, down through the thalamus, down through the brainstem, down into the spinal cord, out the nerve roots, into the organs and glands and the biochemistry and the meridians and all the other stuff, and adjusts their function. Then they send new signals back, and the brain, and they're basically telling the brain, hey, I just did what you told me to do, and the brain makes fine degree modifications and feedbacks back and forth to make the system run. This is the daily business of the autonomic nervous system, working on its constant list of things to do to keep everybody synchronized up to the finest degree possible with the least amount of waste and the highest degree of integration. And when it's at its highest possible degree of integration with the least amount of waste, the most ecological it can possibly be, you're healthy. And for every percentage point that it's not that, you have a symptom. The alarms go off and say, hey, excuse me, there's something down here that's not perfectly linked together. And that symptom alerts the brain to pay attention to that area and micro-tune it back. That is the current state of affairs. And when that is functioning properly, the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, are balanced. Neither the sympathetic or the parasympathetic are using the energy from the reservoir for any purpose. I don't feel threatened. I'm in my zero stress state. No need for the sympathetic to be turning on and mobilizing my defenses to think I'm threatened. I'm in my safe spot, zero stress. I am not eating and I don't have to digest my food. That's parasympathetic. Well, both of them are neutral. Reservoir is filled. I'm working on my list. And what the list is, it's sending signals back and forth and balancing things out every second. Rebuilding tissues, That's my model of health and disease. That's why I believe that stress is the ultimate cause of disease. Stress forces sympathetic to turn on, empty the reservoir, and I get locked in this fight or flight mode, and everything is suspended. Balancing of all these systems is suspended. Working on the list is suspended. Digestion, elimination, immune system, higher brain centers are suspended. And if I get locked there, that is the ultimate cause of disease as far as I'm concerned. What do you do about it? There's a sound frequency accurate to a couple of decimal points that will push in the clutch and reset the whole system back to zero. That'll break the vicious cycle of that sympathetic parasympathetic thing, break that cycle, return it back to normal. And then you listen to that on a daily basis, and it exercises this function like in a gym and strengthens it back up. And now I'm working my list again to untangle the problems that happen. And here we are. Science discovers what I'm talking about. Here with the thalmic neuron theory, the thalamus, which I talked about, the two big lobes, and underneath it is the hypothalamus. The thalamus, the master switchboard, the thalmic neuron theory, a theoretical basis for the role played by the central nervous system in the causes and cures of all disease. Bear with me here for a minute, because this is what these guys are saying. The thalmic neuron theory postulates that the central nervous system is involved in all disease processes. As the central nervous system not only processes incoming physical and chemical information from the peripheral part of the body, it also sends out physiological commands to the peripheral part of the body in order to maintain homeostasis, which I talk about all the time, for the entire body. Inherent in its capacity to learn and adapt is this central nervous system's ability to learn to be sick. So it's the problem with chronic disease. If I'm running this fight or flight response all the time and stuck there for 10, 20, 30 years, then the brain is learning this as its correct mode of function. And when I see patients and I hook them up to the heart rate variability and I see it's sympathetic is stuck, and I'm going to explore which frequencies cause it to reset. In many of these people, the system is reluctant to let go, right? It will come close to letting go and it will veer away because it's got a new habitual program that works. I'm still alive. It's imperfect, but I'd prefer to have the system that I know works, even though it's imperfect, than this new thing that I'm being presented with that looks better, but a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, so to speak. So we see this kind of thing all the time clinically. So here it's going, these pathological habituated states can be reversed by dehabitualization. That's what I'm doing with sound waves. Through manipulation or modulation of the abnormal neural circuits by physical means, physical neuromodulation. I'm doing it with sound waves, like acupuncture or chemical means, such as Chinese medicine, homeopathy, or other modern medical techniques in a repetitious manner to mimic the habituation process. Excuse me, this is PubMed. This is NIH talking about acupuncture and Chinese medicine, homeopathy, or other modern medical techniques. Excuse me, these are not modern medical techniques. These are ancient techniques. Modern medicine has tried to destroy these techniques as competition. But the fact that this article is talking about entering into the master control systems that feed back and forth and entering in a functional way is a pure 100% holistic idea, which is completely at odds with modern medicine and how they view the body. So to have this kind of an article talking about a holistic approach to health, and that health at its basis is a balance of the central nervous system represented by the autonomic nervous system as part of the central nervous system. It's amazing. This is crashing through thousands of barriers of what modern medicine stands for. To have an article like this is just mind-blowing, really is. Right here is the thalamus that they're talking about. The thalmic neuron theory is pretty amazing. In the center of the brain, this is the brain taken in half, sort of split in half, and this part right here is the thalamus. It's sort of an oblong, like a kidney bean, but that's very large. One on either side. There's two of them. This is the limbic system wrapping right around it. That's the amygdala, emotional control center. Emotional memories where traumas are stored. The hypothalamus is right here. So here's the thalamus. Here's the underneath the thalamus, the hypothalamus, where the autonomic nervous system is situated. Down here is the pituitary gland. Back here is the pineal gland. All of this stuff linked up together and hardwired together. Emotions, mind, body, biochemistry, neurology, all of it linked up together, hardwired together. If I take my model brain here, the expensive one, I can pull that apart too. So let's, so we can pull this thing in half like that. And I can also pull this part out. Here's the cerebellum. I can pull this part out. And right here is the thalamus. There's the hypothalamus right there. Let's do that. So the thalamus is this structure. Let's get that focused. And the hypothalamus is this structure. The pituitary is here, right? Hypothalamus, thalamus. And there's one of those thalamus zones in each hemisphere. So there's one on this side too. And the thalamus is Grand Central Station, the master switchboard, where all those signals coming from every part of the body up through the brainstem goes into here, and then this decides where it's going to project out into areas of the cortex where the final resolution takes place. So here we are, here's the thalamus, here's the limbic system, emotional control and memory, and down in here is the hypothalamus, homeostasis, that means sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomic nervous system, amygdala, emotional control centers, hippocampus, emotional memory centers. All of it's hardwired right into the hypothalamus as its master control. And here's the hypothalamus. And so here we are again. The thalamus is here. It's been removed, but there's one on this side and one on the other side. It's here. Hypothalamus, pituitary pineal gland. And when we blow up the hypothalamus, we have this diagram with hypothalamus has all these little tiny organelles inside. Each one does something. The anterior hypothalamic nuclei is the origin of the parasympathetic nervous system, which eventually becomes the vagus nerve when it snakes down here and exits out of the brainstem. And this one back here, the posterior hypothalamic nuclei, is the center of the sympathetic nervous system, all of which forms the autonomic nervous system of sympathetic and parasympathetic here. The green is the vagus nerve, but up in here in the hypothalamus, that anterior hypothalamic nuclei, the origin of the parasympathetic, snakes nerves that come down the brainstem and exit right out here where we name it the vagus nerve, which comes down and innervates all your organs and glands, and the sacral plexus down here at the bottom, which comes out of the sacrum, which actually networks and connects together with the vagus nerve coming down from the top. All of these network together. It's one massive system. And the sympathetic is the yellow from here, from the spinal cord, nerve roots, postganglionic neurons. Then it goes to the organs. So here's another article, same, PubMed, NIH. The Thalmic neuron theory, meridians equals DNA. Can you believe it? I mean, I did a whole live stream on this. The fact that the meridians and the DNA and the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching and the 64 codons, all linked with the meridians, the genetic and embryological basis of traditional Chinese medicine, including acupuncture. So what are they saying here? Here's the thalamus again. Thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal gland. This is the master switchboard. All the information comes up here and gets sprayed out into the cortex. But it communicates hardwired here into the hypothalamus. So all this information coming back and forth through the switchboard is bled off into the hypothalamus. It's monitoring and sending signals out to various places that tells the body what to do through the autonomic nervous system. The thalamus is the master switchboard that has wires going out to every place in the cortex where it's compartmentalizing where does hearing and sight and touch and vibration sense and all the rest, where does it go out here to be processed? So let's say here a sample of the skin. Let's talk about vibration sense, the skin sensors that tell us the sense of touch and vibration come through these nerves into the spinal cord, into the posterior tracts of the spinal cord, here gracilis and cuneatus, travel up the spinal cord into the brain stem, up into the thalamus, where the thalamus routes it into a specific area of the cortex, which refines processing this information. All of it is connected into the hypothalamus, which is right down in here, and the pituitary gland. But what they're saying is that there's this thing called the homunculus. I've talked about this before. It's where sensory information comes up and is deposited in the cortex. Once it's gone through the thalamus, it routes it up here to the pre-central gyrus, the sensory cortex. And the post-central gyrus, which is the motor cortex, that sends signals back down. And the information from the body, the sensory information, forms this thing that they call the homunculus, which is certain sensory information is more important than others. And so they've drawn this funny picture of the body where its size is distorted based on the importance of the signals. The density of nerves in the body, in the fingers and fingertips and the face and the lips, is much denser nerve networks in these areas than in these small areas like the elbow or your back. And this would be both the sensory homunculus, the sensory cortex, and the motor cortex has a different one. But all of it is routed through the thalamus here. Here's the thalamus. And very specific areas in the thalamus. And the homunculus here in this cortex in the brain is actually in miniature, like a fractal, here. We actually have this same homunculus is here as well. And so the homunculus is fractalized. Its projection out here in the cortex in its finest degree of processing power and a more coarse level down in here is the same thing that all of these meridians that we're talking about and the meridian lines and the meridian points are their own homunculus, also hardwired into something called the internal capsule of the thalamus. The entire acupuncture system is in miniature located here, with all the meridian lines and all the points of the meridians in miniature in the thalamus gland. So this whole thing of the motor cortex homunculus and the sensory cortex homunculus are miniaturized in the hypothalamus that projects out to these zones. And all of these meridians and meridian lines and points and everything else that goes on here, miniaturized in the thalamus gland, which forms the basis of acupuncture, is here in the thalamus gland. So here's the thalamus. The color-coded areas of the thalamus show which areas of the cortex it projects its information to in hardwired wires. And once the acupuncture system in miniature here in the thalamus, in the homunculus of the thalamus, is projected out here into the cortex, that projects it back down in the motor cortex, right back down into the body, and maps it out on the body. And it maps it out in fractals as well, because there's the entire acupuncture system in miniature, every part of my body, not just the acupuncture system, but every organ and gland and vertebra and skull bone and acupuncture point is in miniature in the ear, in its own homunculus, as you can see here, where the different body parts have different sizes depending on which things are most important, that have the most importance for survival. All my organs, my spine, arms and legs. It's like a fetus rolled up in fetus position, where the acupuncture points that control my foot and my ankle and my leg and my butt and my internal organs and my head. And it goes on and on. Micro, fractalized reflex networks, homunculi spread everywhere. On my hands, every organ and gland and spine and bone and acupuncture point is in miniature everywhere, reflected like a hologram, like a fractalized hologram. On the bottom of my feet, reflexology. All my organs, all my glands, my spine, all the acupuncture points in miniature. On my feet, on my face, mapped out in miniature, another homunculus. All of it's here. All of the acupuncture points for all the meridians are here in miniature. In my eyes, another fractal hologram. Everything projected onto my eyes in miniature. All my acupuncture meridians, all the points in miniature. All my organs and glands and vertebrae and skull bones and everything. It's all there. In the tongue, tongue diagnosis in acupuncture. In Ayurveda, there's a whole tongue diagnosis thing. Once again, there's no reason to not suspect that all the acupuncture meridians and all the points are in miniature in the tongue as well. Fractal holograms throughout the whole system. In the teeth, in chiropractic, this is applied kinesiology. It's called neurological tooth. Every single tooth in your body is on a separate meridian. And each tooth goes with a specific organ and a specific meridian. So the whole thing is fractalized once more in miniature in my teeth. It's the reason why one tooth will get decay and not the one next to it, because this meridian has gotten weak and it's robbed the tooth of its chi energy for a more important thing, the organ. So the tooth is at a deficit. So it's the one who can be attacked by bacteria now because its defenses are down, because the meridian system pulled energy from it to help the organ out. All of it mediated through the thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary pineal network, where the thalamus has all systems in miniature in a homunculus that gets radiated out into the cortex, where you see the homunculus larger represented. But all of it is curled up in here, projected out into all systems in the body in endless miniature fractalized patterns. And you can you can enter into any one of these. You can you can do techniques that influence all of these organs through touch, through electromagnetic fields, through sound waves. You can put pressure on these parts and affect its associated organ or gland. That's what reflexology is all about. So hand reflexology is doing the same thing. I'm coming in with my fingers and I'm rubbing these zones, and it's inferring the signals from me rubbing this are firing down through the nerves into the spinal cord, up through the thalamus to the homunculus there, and that's hardwired into the autonomic nervous system, which forces the autonomic nervous system to pay attention to liver. It activates the whole network, including the acupuncture network. So the acupuncture liver meridian begins to get waked up because I'm entering into the system and putting an influence there. Putting acupuncture needles in the points in the ear also fires up the nerve network into the thalamus, into the homunculus there, which connects to the autonomic nervous system, which connects to the meridian system. any place you want to enter into the system, any of these micro reflex zones where you input affects the entire web, the whole thing, through the homunculus nested here, and is influenced with the hypothalamus and master control centers that tell everybody what to do. All of it is fractalized. Fractal holographic network reflected in the body, which is similar to how the galactic and intergalactic networks are networked into how the brain works. All of it, this massive, gigantic network of vibrational frequencies forming standing waves based on fractal mathematics and holograms. Everything is reflected in micro-miniaturization throughout the whole universe. All of it reflected in miniature in how my body's put together. That reflects the universal pattern. The key to it is me in a state of balance, homeostasis within myself, within my consciousness, reflected in my body. Consciousness itself is reflected in materiality by coalescing energy patterns at a quantum field with the math of harmonics and overtones and music theory into physical forms that are based on the mathematics that we see in music. Harmony in my consciousness puts me in a place of balance where all these things heal themselves from the inside out. So with that, it's not even the end. I mean, there's so much information that's popping through right now, I don't even know what to do with it. I mean, the ones that came through just this morning that I haven't even included here will form a continuation of this next week. And what I'm getting at is that arising out of this experience that we're experiencing now, where the world is, where on the one hand we've got the world in disarray and the effects of human misactivity and non-alignment with universal rules of life have created perturbations in the in the universal field, reflected in miniature on the planet. So breaking the laws of nature eventually run aground, like the whole planet and climate change and all that business that is destroying the biosphere that we depend on. And what are human beings doing? Denying it, or doing nothing about it. And who are the ones who are doing nothing about it? It's global leadership, who are bought and paid for by big money interests. And it's their interest to keep it going the way it is because there's profits to be made. But the majority of human beings on the planet, the you and me of the world, feel powerless from that sort of political structure and monetization structures of the world, but we're not powerless at all. We've been led to believe by them that we are, because the more we're controlled, the higher the profits go. So you break out of that mold and you come back to yourself, your cosmic self, and you realize that you are in control, that you break out of your hypnosis, you bind together with other people like yourself. And now we're saying that we can bind together in scientific ways that align us together and bring us in direct contact with the master forces that control everything at the deep collective unconscious level, which controls reality itself at a quantum field. And we can do an end game around who thinks they're in control of the world, and we can manipulate reality itself. That's what we're up to here. Nothing small, right? And that's what the soundtrack at the end of each one of these is about. We're attempting to flesh out an understanding of how the universe works so that we can enter into this grand experiment of mind-linking consciousness together to shift the quantum field and allow ourselves to reach a zero stress point in ourselves where the doors open up and the universe can come and shine through and manifest the highest picture of what reality could be, that we can participate in giving birth to. That's the plan. And the soundtracks are meant to bring us to a state of zero stress in the system, balanced and coherent together with each other, like this place in ourselves. So, headphones, please. And open yourself up to the biggest influence you can think of, you can imagine before a thought in the present moment now, where it all comes together, where we all help each other reach that point and come together. So, close your eyes, and here we go. So, sorry for the weirdo snafus. That one hasn't happened before, but that's the nature of reality, right? You never know what's going to happen next. Next week it'll be the same as usual on Sunday at 12:30. Meantime, take care of yourselves. Be happy and healthy and holy until I see you again next Sunday. Thank you.